Start recording. Okay. So where we really left off, and just to remind you guys, there is actually a mini quiz today, right? It's what is camera zoom? And remember, that's Alt-right mouse button, right? Alt-right mouse button. I'll repeat it before the end of class as well, so if you just want to wait till the end. But we do have a mini quiz today, and since we're using industry compatible, it's what is camera zoom, right? Camera zoom, and that is Alt-right mouse button. All right. So at this point, we've kind of got this started up, right? And we've got kind of our main wheel will start to be built right here. Like I said, we're going to come back at a later time to do the rims. But we're going to try to build more of the body today. And the cool thing about building more of the body, and tomorrow, Wednesday, we'll just do a review day because trying to record videos on my Surface Pro is hit or miss, as you guys remember a couple times last term. So tomorrow we're doing distance learning. We'll all be at home. So we'll just do a review day. I'll kind of go back over some of the car stuff again that we've already covered. Give you guys just a day to be able to say, cool, Mike reviewed that, and then work on the car without doing anything new per se. All right. So one of the other things I wanted to show you guys as well is the fact that you actually have these different shaders. We kind of have seen this before, right? So if I go up to the top right here, right, we have these little kind of shader modes right here, right? There's the default shader one. There's the wireframe, right? So you do have kind of wireframe right there. You do have shaded. Remember, you do have your viewport shading, which will do full lighting and rendering and all that stuff, and all of your EV things. But one of the things you can also do with your standard shading model, right? So remember, there's this wireframe, right? And then there's the default shaded, right? It's kind of the solid sphere. But if you go over to this little kind of V that points down, right? So it's kind of right here in this right corner. Not the outliner, but kind of right here. You don't have to use this, by the way. This is just a cool option to let you guys see it and know that you can do this. But if you click on this little V, you'll notice that you have options here. Like you can have the color, use your texture, or any vertex painting. You can turn depth of field or cavity mapping on, right? You'll see it's set to studio right now, but you'll notice that there's a lighting in this lighting section when you click on that little V, right? So it's just that little V right there. We've got our default kind of shader on. It's the white sphere right there. But that little V has a section called matcap, right? You can actually even do flat. If you just want things to look flat shaded where there's like no lighting on it at all, you do flat. Studio's kind of your default. But there is something called matcap, right? Matcap. And what this does, it just changes the look to have a slightly different lighting kind of specularity quality to it that tends to look nicer for sculpting or modeling. So matcap's on, and you'll see right below matcap, there is this little kind of sphere here, right? If you click on that, you'll see there's options here, right? So you can kind of use this like brown kind of shader effect if you want to. You can click and use kind of a red wax looking effect, right? So just your default kind of shading mode, if you go to the V here, though, you can change it from Studio, which has some of its own options, but see how they're kind of simpler? You can go to matcap. But one of the things that you'll notice is kind of things like the kind of the more matte kind of shader ones are cool for like character creature stuff. You will notice, though, that there are stuff like this one, which has kind of got this highly reflective look to it, which can kind of be cool for cars. And you'll also notice that you actually can pick red. So if you really want to get like a car look to it, right? And what's cool about this stuff is you see how it kind of catches the clear coat kind of shininess of the surface. So this can actually be cool to kind of see how your surfaces are going to reflect light as you're modeling, right? And particularly for like a car or a spaceship, that's pretty useful, right? To kind of, so these matcap kind of the way they interact with the light and viewport is a little bit more dynamic and interesting. And they have certain kind of material properties already turned on in a very simple fashion that can make it look more like a car material, right? So you notice that you can just kind of pick like that red kind of car paint one. If you want kind of another one that's got good reflectivity on it, but it's not red, you can go with that white one, which I kind of like. But if you go to the little V right here and you go to matcap, you can click on this pull down, and there's lots of neat extra options. You can kind of get like more of a kind of different chrome look to it. So you get these nice little kind of matcap features. Some of you guys from last year that had my and Mudbox, remember Mudbox had matcaps, but they kind of to turn them off and on was a little bit clumsy in Mudbox. a lot of packages actually offer this nowadays. Moto had it really cool and easy, although the way Blender does it's way easier. ZBrush has these things. So you actually see these when you get a lot of sculpting applications. So you don't have to use this, but if you want to kind of switch your default viewport shading, click on the V, and you can switch from Studio, because there's only a handful that aren't radically different for Studio. You can go to matcap instead, and you get some extra cool ones here. I like kind of the brown or the red wax for like character creature sculpting, but I'm working on cars and spaceships. I kind of like the white or the red here. Kind of up to you on how you want to do it. I think I'll go with white just because it's kind of a little more of a neutral color, but you're still going to get that nice shininess to it. And that helps to show the form off of your car better. So you can actually see how your corners and your fenders will catch light with this. So you do not have to use these, but they're pretty neat, and Blender is ridiculously easy at turning these off, on, switching around, right? So I figured that'd be a cool thing to show you guys today, that this is available as an option. It's that little V section. Because most of everything else today I'm going to do is just more busy work, right? It's more like, hey, let's just do some extrude and bridge border edges. So I'm not actually going to do much new today, but we are going to progress further, right? There is going to be a new video for this. But that's a cool thing I want to make sure you guys know, was these matcap shaders are there. If you just click on that little V. All right. So in this case, we could actually do a little bit more work with the fenders if we wanted to, right? So I could easily just hit 2 for edge mode, right? Because remember, 1 is vertex, 2 is edge, 3 is face, 4 is object. But I want to be in edge mode. Remember, we're using industry compatible, right? Edit, preferences, key map, turn industry compatible on as your option. That gives you the basic default kind of Maya quick keys for a lot of stuff. And what I'm going to do is I want to kind of extend this fender forward a bit. So I'm going to select an edge here. Because remember, 2 is edge mode. So I click on that edge. I'll say Q for my selection tool. Remember, W is move, E is rotate, R is scale, Q is your selection tool. One of the things that's cool about this selection tool, though, and you notice that some of your tools actually kind of, because we're in the modeling viewport here, some of your tools you'll notice have this little kind of little triangle in the right corner. That means if you hold down left mouse button on it, it's got other options, right? So you can see it's by default select box, but you see there is a select circle and there is a tweak tool, right? And if you actually keep hitting Q, you'll notice that Q toggles. It kind of cycles between those. So if you keep hitting Q, that's your selection tool, but it switches to circle, and then it switches to lasso, and then it switches to tweak, right? So that's really good to know. I actually really like the tweak tool, so I'll just kind of cycle through the tweak. And if you wanted to, you could assign these to quick keys, right? These could be assigned to quick keys. So if I right-click on this guy and I go to assign shortcut, I can easily just set this to a mouse button, right? So I could actually set it to, like, say my, there we go. And you see that's a set to mouse button 4. I can go to circle select and right click, right? Assign shortcut. And then I can assign that to my 5th mouse button. So you notice how you can actually assign those to mouse buttons. So I could have regular box select on, but then if I do one of my mouse buttons, it goes to tweak tool. If I do the other one, it goes to circle, and then Q just goes back to kind of the defaults. So those are cool. So I will show you a little bit more new in terms of these things, but these are optional. You don't have to use these, right? So some of the stuff I'm showing you that's new today is kind of more like it's available, it's really cool, but you don't necessarily have to use it. But if you hold down left mouse button on this, you can actually pick the different ones here. You can also just keep hitting Q and it toggles through those, it circles through them. But also you can assign them to quick keys, right? Even mouse buttons. So if you have like a mouse button, a mouse that's got more than 3 buttons, right? Like it's got a 4th, 5th, or 6th mouse button, you can actually assign those buttons because you really don't want to screw with the default 3-button mouse settings. Don't screw with those, right? But like your 4th and 5th you can use. So what circle select does is it's actually your drag select, and it has a radius, so you can make that radius bigger or smaller. But this allows you to just left-click drag, and you just kind of just drag select. So this has a drag select just like Maya would have, right? So that's what circle select does. What your tweak tool does is it can not only select stuff, so you just left click to select, but if you say left click drag, it automatically moves it. So your tweak tool is actually a move tool already built in. And you don't even have to turn it off, right? I could switch to my different selection types. And this is just like Maya's tweak tool. Some of you guys that are familiar with Maya, except it's all right here. So if you hold down your left mouse button on your selection tool, which by default is set to box, you'll see there's other options there, like your drag, select, and your tweak. And you can assign those to mouse buttons. But Q also toggles through those. So one of the cool things is when you start to really understand all these cool things you do with Blender, Blender is truly pretty amazing nowadays, right? I actually left an already pretty great software in Modo for this because I just found Blender was kind of pretty much right up there with Modo, but for pretty much no cost, right? So Tweak Tool I love. It's actually one of my favorite tools because you just come in here and left-click drag. Do you have to use this tool, the Tweak Tool? No, right? It's just moving stuff based on the view, which if you just use W for Move Tool and then select and middle mouse button, but you'll see that that's 2 clicks. If you use your normal Move tool, it's 2 clicks to move it. You have to select and then do another mouse interaction to move it. With the Tweak tool, it's 1, right? The actual selecting is also the moving. And the less clicks it takes to do anything, the better the workflow of an application is. So I love the Tweak tool. It's one of my favorite modeling tools. It's pretty awesome. You could switch to your different selection types, and the Tweak tool stays on, which is really, really cool also. But also, it could just be used as a selection tool. So I actually spend a lot of my time just in Tweak, and I'll use it to select. And then if I need circle select or box select, I'll switch to that. So remember, Q is your selection tool quick key, like W, E, R, our move, rotate, scale. But if you keep hitting Q, it toggles through the 4 different options you have for your selection tool. But all of those different options can actually be assigned to quick keys of their own, even mouse buttons. Remember, that's just as simple as right-click on it, and then you can assign a keyboard shortcut, right? So that's how easy it is to assign a keyboard shortcut. Just right-click on the tool, and it brings up the option to assign shortcut. And then you just kind of click on whatever key you want it to be the shortcut for. All right, so that's cool. That's kind of a little more, I lied a little bit. I did actually want to show you guys a little bit of circle and Tweak tool. Now, I remember a lot of you guys already have seen this, right? So some of this is just great reteaching, reinforcement for you guys. I do have a couple new students, right? And I'm just trying to kind of go over some really good core stuff for them that they'll find useful as well. That way they don't have to necessarily go back and watch all the old videos for the earlier projects, even though those are still there, right? We have those other channels. So feel free to explore those if you want to. But also, it's just great to remind you guys that you could use these, right? It's always good to see those. So in this case, I'm just going to left-click select. I'm going to go to 2 for edge mode. I'm going to select an edge. But remember, I can hold down Shift, right? Because Shift will add to selections. Control will subtract. So if I hold down Control, I can click on that to deselect or just click off, right? You can always just kind of click off somewhere or something like that. So you just click off somewhere and it deselects it. But I'm going to select that edge. And I don't want to go all the way down to here. I'm going to go to about there. So I'll Shift left click on that one. And remember, these are kind of on the same edge loop. And remember, there is in the select menu, right? Because remember, we're in modeling, and so you have these menus up here. This is one of the great things that they did for the 2.8 series and above, is they gave us these layouts that are specifically focused on stuff. The outliner and properties are all kind of unified into one really excellent user interface. And you now even have all of your kind of basic fundamental tools in here as well as right-click. It's just such a great interface and workflow now. So in the select menu, you'll see these are all your select tools, right? And you'll see that there is the select linked area. And we've talked about select linked. It's default right bracket, and that selects all connected polygons. I changed it to the quick key I have at home, which is spacebar, because I use that all the time, and spacebar is just a cooler quick key for it, easier to get to, right? But also there's something called shortest path, and I've set my own quick key up for that as well. That doesn't have one by default, so you would have to set that up. But shortest path, what it does is it selects the kind of edge loop range, right? Some of you guys remember this from Maya, where Maya could do a range selection. It's a pretty standard feature in most applications. So what it does is it selects the edges in between the kind of start and end edge, which makes it really easy to grab this kind of stuff, right? Of course, you could manually select these just to keep holding down shift and left click, left click, left click. But oftentimes, once you start to get to know these other tools, they make it even faster and easier. Now, of course, remember that we have all of our tweak, move, rotate, scale tools, but also many of our modeling tools on the side right here, right? Extrude's right there. There is a quick key for that though, right? Control E. So if I hit Control E, it brings up the Extrude tool. Now remember, you can grab the yellow, and that will actually move kind of more directly along the average normal direction. So it'll kind of move those in directly this way. But if you did middle mouse button, it would actually kind of do a view move, right? It would actually just move it according to your view, kind of like the tweak tool. And so I can kind of just extrude those in a little bit just to kind of get us a little bit of that shape. I could always just switch to move tool and middle mouse just to kind of move that up a little bit according to the view, maybe forward a little bit. And of course, I could always switch back to my tweak tool. Maybe tweak this edge out a little bit. Maybe hit 1 for vertex to tweak that edge vertex out a little bit. And you see how you can kind of come back in here and make these cool little adjustments to further adjust some of this form and shape. I could then easily start to build up more of this, right? So I could go to 2 for edge mode again, and I could maybe select this edge right here, and I can hit Control E for extrusion. Middle mouse button, because in this case I just want to do a view, and then middle mouse button again to extrude again, and then maybe middle mouse button again. So you see how you can just keep that extrude tool on and keep middle mouse button clicking? Middle mouse button is brilliantly utilized in Blender, right? Not only is it your view move, your view rotate on your move rotate tools, but it's your uniform scale on your scale tool. But it also kind of does your default, a lot of your default interactions like view extrude and bevel. So it's kind of a neat shortcut for a lot of your tool options. In this case, I still want to make some adjustments to the shape, so I'll switch back to my tweak tool. Remember, that's just Q, and you can keep cycling through it. I'm just using the quick key for it. And I can easily just come in here and adjust this edge, right? Maybe even hit 1 to go to vertex mode and just tweak that vertex a little bit. Maybe go back to 2 for edge mode, and I can start to bring this edge kind of up and in a little bit. Maybe bring this one back in a little bit. And I could even rotate it, right? E for rotate. Middle mouse button for some view rotate there. I could always switch to that one, view rotate. So you see how you can actually keep your rotate tool on and easily just kind of swap to these, right? So you can kind of keep these on if you want to. You don't have to drop the tool. And then I can hit Control E for extrusion again, middle mouse button to kind of bring this in, E for rotate to do a bit of view rotate. Of course, you can use these other handles, but we're building a futuristic curved car, so move, view, move, and rotate will work pretty well. Control E again for extrusion. And you'll notice as I move these in, because clipping's on, right? We talked about that the other day in our mirror modifier. You see how it automatically welded those edges together? And then, of course, I could switch to the tweak tool, and I could bring this out a little bit. Bring those out a little bit there. Maybe hit 1 for vertex. And you'll notice quickly, we've got this cool little bit of extra paneling up here, right? And I can keep switching to different modes, like face mode to bring this back a little bit more. 2 for edge mode. So you see how you can keep tweak tool on and just keep switching to your different kind of selection types. 1 for vertex, 2 for edges, 3 for faces, and your tweak tool still stays on. Your move, rotate, and scale tools will still stay on. So these are your manipulators in particular for shaping generally, and actually your things like your extrude tool will stay on too. So a lot of these tools will stay on until you switch to a different tool, even if you're switching to different selection types, which when you actually get used to that is really cool, right? So these are the kinds of things that once you get used to that more and more as you spend more time with Blender, you start to really appreciate those things. All right, so I'm just tweaking a little more shape there. Control S for save. But you see how we're kind of able to build out kind of the paneling the way we want this shape to be here, right? So I could easily maybe even grab that edge and Control E for extrusion, middle mouse button. You see how I can kind of create that paneling there. I can always switch back to my tweak tool, bring these in a little bit. Maybe bring that down in a little bit. If you want, you can always add a loop cut, right? Remember, Alt-C, but it is right here as well, right? There's extrude right there, loop cut right there, but there are quick keys. And then you just left-click, and it puts an edge loop in there. I can hit W if I want to do a view move on it. Of course, I can switch back to the tweak tool if I want to. Let me bring that vertex in a little bit. And then I could switch to 2 for edge mode, and I could select this edge and this edge right here, right? Now, you could do multiple edges to multiple edges. In fact, Blender, you'll notice, if I select 2 edges to 1 edge, as long as they're not on the same loop, when I right-click, right, because remember, right-click brings up your tools, you'll see there is bridge edge loops. And you'll notice that Blender can actually bridge uneven numbers. You guys remember Maya couldn't do that? Blender can. It does create a lot of triangles, so I tend to not do that anyways, but Blender can handle that. In this case, I just wanted 1 edge to 1 edge, but they're opposite each other. They don't touch. Right-click. Remember, when you right-click in Blender, it brings up the edge tools, right? Or at least most of them. Sometimes you have to go to this edge to find some, but most of them will be in here. And one of those is bridge edge loops. And what that does is, you see how it creates geometry. It creates a bridge, right? It creates a polygon that connects those. So it's a very accurately named tool. I can then do Alt-C for loop cut to put a quick little loop in there. Maybe even a second one. And then I can do a little bit of tweak for the shape. And you see how we could basically build these car panels, but you notice how we're kind of building the car panels, we want them to be shaped, right? We're not having to try to force a box into a shape. By using the extrude border edge method, we can kind of build the paneling to follow the exact contour of the paneling we want, and then figure out how to start to fit it together through bridges. And once you get used to this method, it's pretty awesome. It's a pretty great way to build cars and spaceships. But you notice how we just have this cool paneling goes up right here and connects, and then we can start to figure out how we want these to connect later on. It gives you a tremendous amount of freedom to define how you want your contoured shapes to flow, right? So more and more we're starting to get a car built up here, but you really notice that this was just extruding, right? I was basically just selecting some edges and extruding them out, moving and shaping them, whichever way I want to shape it. Tweak tool's an option, but you don't have to use it if you don't want to. Bridge. And then I just want to make sure you guys kind of got to see the tweak and circle select tools that are their options here. And that you can even go over here and kind of pick a different matcap to kind of give it a nice kind of shinier look to it. All right. So I think that will be a great place to stop recording.